Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. It's always lovely to be in Kiev, and thank you for coming indoors on such a beautiful sunny day. My name is Poppy Collinson. I'm the Director for Europe and Central Asia with BPP University. I'm also a current law student with BPP University. I study in my part-time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process for becoming a lawyer in the UK, and then I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have about either the process of becoming a lawyer, the university I work for, or anything else related to the legal profession in the UK. So what I'm going to start by doing, which might seem a bit strange as the topic of the talk is how to be a lawyer in the UK, is to tell you that there is no such job as a lawyer in the UK. In fact, lawyer is not a protected term, and anybody can call themselves a lawyer, but it doesn't mean they are what you think of as a lawyer. In the UK, the profession is split into two parts. We have solicitors and we have barristers. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the difference between them and the different routes to qualification for both. First, can I check everyone can hear me properly and that I'm not talking too fast? Everyone's happy? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I don't know if you already know the difference between solicitors and barristers, but as a very quick overview, the people you will have seen in films wearing wigs are barristers, and everything else is a solicitor. So solicitors are usually employed by law firms. They work in very, very client-facing roles. So if you have a problem with a law, the first person you would see would be a solicitor. If you want to buy a house or sell a house, you would speak to a solicitor. If you want to make a will, you would speak to a solicitor. And it's quite common for families to have a law firm that they go to for all of their legal problems. A barrister is less client-faced and they're self-employed. So they're employed on your behalf by your solicitor. So what does that mean for you wanting to work in that profession? Well, the table here is quite helpful. So a solicitor is someone who is employed by a law firm, by a big business, by a university, by any kind of organisation. So they have job security. They have all the kind of working rights you expect with any employed role. They're client-facing, and over the course of a number of years, they might build up very close relationships with their clients. So the example I gave of a family working with one law firm for all of their problems, the best example would be my family. We've worked with the same law firm since my great-grandmother was 20, so over 100 years. This law firm has worked with us every time somebody wants to make a will, whenever we sell a house. So those kind of relationship-building skills are really important. And you're looking at those long-term client relationships. You would have, as a solicitor, client contact throughout the transaction. We call it transaction. I would say helping someone with a problem from the start to the finish. If somebody is arrested for a crime, the person they speak to first will be a solicitor, and that solicitor will be their first point of contact right the way through to trial if they end up on a trial. This role needs a lot of skills. So obviously you need good people skills because you're client-facing. Solicitors' roles will usually involve drawing up contracts, drafting documents, really varied kind of areas that you can work in as a solicitor. And at the bottom it says rights of audience. It's a slightly technical phrase which simply means that with an advocacy certificate, solicitors can also represent clients in court now, which used to be the big difference between solicitors and barristers. Looking at the role of barrister, which everybody has seen, as I say, it's the person you see in a film wearing a wig, shouting at the judge in court. It's not really how it works in real life. But this is a self-employed role. So you need to be quite entrepreneurial to be a barrister, because if you can't create the relationships and the reputation that means that solicitors employ you on their behalf, then you won't work. And if you don't work because you're self-employed, you have a problem. It's very much less direct client-facing. So a solicitor would speak to the client who's been arrested, and then the solicitor would hire the barrister on the client's behalf. So the first time a barrister might see the person they're representing in court might be on the first day they represent them in court. The long-term relationships they build up are with their solicitors, so with the clients who are employing them, which isn't somebody who has a legal problem, it's a solicitor. They really only have contact with people at key points in a trial or a transaction. So if you're going to court, that's when you see your barrister. If you have a barrister working with you on a negotiation for a big company merger, that's when you'd see them. But the day-to-day contact would remain the solicitor. The really big skills that are needed for being a barrister, obviously, because you're appearing in court for the majority of your time, are advocacy skills. And because of this, barristers tend to develop very specialist legal knowledge and advice. Although, again, because there's always a contradiction here, I have said they're self-employed, barristers can also be hired and employed by law firms, but the typical scenario is that a barrister is self-employed and a solicitor is employed. Okay? So, when I meet students, usually they tell me they want to be a barrister. This is because I think there's far more awareness of barristers and what they do. So, for example, when you see a court case reported on the news, it's usually the barrister who has spoken in court who gives an interview talking about what has happened. But I think that just gives a false impression, because there would also have been solicitors working on that case, and it still might not be the right thing for you. So if you are someone who really hates standing up in front of people and speaking, maybe being a barrister isn't for you. You have to think about that, because that's what the majority of your working life would be spent doing. So from the previous page and the characteristics, what really suits you? What are you looking for? If you're looking for a secure job where you build those kind of relationships, you build up your reputation within an industry, then being a solicitor is probably for you. On the other hand, if you're a risk taker and what you want is something really dynamic and where you have the freedom to work or not work, then maybe being a barrister is for you. If you, in general, barristers work alone, although they work within a law chambers, if you're more of a team player and you're someone who wants to work among a team, again, you might want to think about that, because maybe being a solicitor, working with a team of lawyers in a big law firm or in a big business, might be more suited to what you want. And I think the biggest one, although this applies to both professions, is how do you work under pressure? Obviously, there's pressure in all work. It's 2018. There are no easy jobs anymore. But as a barrister, you will often be going into court arguing your case on behalf of your client with only a few hours' notice. If that's something that strikes dread into your heart, then being a barrister maybe wouldn't be the right decision. And then finally, I think is the most obvious, do you have strong oral communication skills? Again, if you are someone who prefers to work one-on-one with a client, who perhaps prefers to write their communications rather than to go into court and declaim them, think about being a solicitor. Think about those relationships you can build up with your clients and the communication you can have one-on-one, rather than the more adversarial system which we have in the court. Okay. I'm going to talk about the routes to qualification for both professions, and they both start out the same. So I won't go over the first part of it when I talk about being a barrister, but I'm going to talk first about being a solicitor. There are some reforms coming up in UK training routes for solicitors, but they won't be in place before 2020. So the information I'm going to give you today is valid for students thinking about studying from now. The first thing you need to have is an English law degree. And I expect that no one in this room knows that a Scottish law degree doesn't count if you want to be a lawyer in England. We're a tiny little island with 2 different legal systems. So what I'm talking about when I say about being a lawyer, I'm talking about England and Wales. So you either need a full LLB from a university in England or Wales, and most universities would offer an LLB. What you do need to make sure is it's a qualifying LLB so that it covers all the areas you're expected to have covered on an undergraduate law degree for someone who wants to be a lawyer. I'm pointing that out because with some of the modular degrees there are, you wouldn't cover enough law to have covered everything you need to do to continue on the route. More typically, we see for international students the qualification which is the GDL, the Graduate Diploma in Law. This is, and I'm a little bit biased because this is the qualification I took. My first degree is an English Literature Bachelor's, which I took very, very long ago. And then a few years ago, I took the Graduate Diploma in Law with BPP University. It's a fantastic qualification. We say a year, but it's really 9 months. You cover the 7 main units that you would cover on a full law degree. So you cover constitutional law, contract law, criminal law, tort law, equity and trusts, land law, and EU law. And then as well as that, you have an opportunity to cover an area of law which interests to you, which isn't on the main syllabus. So it's a really good way of converting either a Ukrainian law degree or any level of degree from any country into a UK, the equivalent of a UK LLB. After that, you need to take what we call the LPC, the legal practice course. This is a really vocational program. It's a 1-year program, and in that you will study litigation, you'll study drafting, you will do some advocacy, you'll learn the skills of having meetings with clients, all of that geared towards how it will be when you actually go to work. And then the final part of the training, which I think for most students is the most exciting part, is the training contract. This, you have to, and this is on the students, the onus is on students, is to find a law firm who will sponsor your 2-year training contract. Unlike the GDL and the LPC, they will pay you while they train you, but because of that, it's quite competitive. The best students start applying for this before they even start the LPC, because there's an opportunity to have not only the training contract, but a law firm pay for your LPC as well. At BPP, the university I work for, we work with over 60 of the main law firms in the UK, and they send us their trainees exclusively. So they are funding the students to do the LPC, and then the students go directly to the training contract. At the end of the training contract, you are, ta-da, a fully qualified solicitor in England and Wales, and you can apply to work with any law firm, whether in the UK or internationally, who needs an English-trained lawyer. Because I've said a lot of words, I'm going to stop for a second and just see, does anyone have any questions so far? Yes? Mm-hmm.
How could someone turn their Ukrainian law degree into a UK qualified degree, let's say, within the shortest period of time?
So that is, as I was talking about, the Graduate Diploma in Law. So yeah, that's going to be the quickest way to turn a Ukrainian qualification, law degree, into the equivalent of an LLB.
You said that's 9 months.
It's 9 months, yeah. There are a couple, there are...
Not offered in all universities, that's just...
The Graduate Diploma in Law is not offered in all universities, but it's offered in quite a large number of universities. I'm obviously mentioning BPP because I work for BPP and I've studied with BPP. You will find other universities do it. What I would look at, if I was looking for a graduate diploma in law, is I'd look at the tutor's background. So in our university, all tutors have to come from industry, and that makes a really big difference because the GDL, although it's academic, is getting you towards training. So that they give you a spin. So when they're talking about criminal law, they will talk about cases they've worked on, for example. I'd also look at the output. So the graduation statistics, where students go, how many students go on to qualify as lawyers, etc. But this is the most standard route is to go for the graduate diploma in law and then the LPC or BPTC for barristers.
GDL, is it called in any different way?
The graduate diploma in law, GDL, that's it. Yeah, so the qualifications I'm talking about are regulated by the legal authorities in the UK, so they're very standardised.
Right. So a Ukrainian lawyer comes to the UK, and within 1 year, let's say, they can transform their Ukrainian degree into a UK one, right?
Yeah.
And then LPC is what again?
1 year.
1 year. What does it stand for?
Legal practice course.
Legal practice course. And then training.
That's right, yeah.
No. But I'll probably talk to you after.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions? No? Okay. Let me then take you on to the process for becoming a barrister. So the first part of it is very, very similar. You have the LLB or GDL, and then instead of the LPC, you take the BPTC, the Bar Practice Training Course. This again is a 1-year certificate, and that's what I'm currently studying. At the end of that 1 year, you have to find a pupillage. This is incredibly competitive, and so you're given up to, as a UK student, you're given up to 5 years after finishing the BPTC to get a pupillage, to still go on and qualify as a barrister. As an international student, that time limit would still run, but obviously you wouldn't be able to stay in the UK for that 5 years without having work. The barrister route is a really interesting route, and if it is your passion, then I would encourage you to pursue it. However, from a point of view of job security, being employed, or the rest of it, the solicitor route is a much safer route to take. There are far more jobs available, basically, and the process is a little bit more straightforward in terms of getting a training contract, etc. Okay. Any questions about being a barrister? Yeah.
You are talking about thank you. You are talking about security in these two different routes, and my question is whether a barrister is such a dangerous job. I mean, do barristers have some programs which secure them from some influences? I mean, during the process.
I'm sorry, can you tell me what you mean by influences?
I mean, for example, when a barrister takes part in court, when he presents his position in court, and then the judge and there is the other side who is totally against his position, and then when you come out the court, you feel dangerous.
Okay. I think there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding. When I talk about an unsecure profession, I don't mean anything about the safety. It is, touch wood, very, very safe in the UK in any profession. What I mean by security is job security. So things like maternity benefits, sick pay, having a salary coming in every month. As a barrister is self-employed, your salary will depend on the amount of work you get. In terms of the rule of law in England, I'm glad to say that, in general, what happens in the court stays in the court. So there isn't usually an issue of security for barristers, for solicitors, that their clients are upset or whatever. Obviously, some clients will be very unhappy with the way a trial goes. Some clients may well even, shout or whatever. But in general, the UK is a very safe country to live and work in. So I think when I'm talking about being unsecure, I'm purely talking about salary and employment rights. I'm not talking about safety. Even our judges are very safe.
And I have got the last question. Is there a big difference between salaries of solicitors and salaries of barristers?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and actually there's a big difference between salaries of solicitors and solicitors as well. Obviously, the law is a huge subject which affects everything we do in our daily life, And some areas in law pay less well than other areas. So logically, criminal law probably won't pay as well as company law. If you're working in commercial law and you're negotiating multi-million-pound contracts, or you're defending or prosecuting in multi-million-pound cases, then there's going to be a lot more money available from the companies to retain the best legal representation than if you are going to court or working to represent maybe a mother who is at risk of having her children taken away. She has no salary, so she has to only employ the solicitor that the government gives enough money to employ. So it really, really varies. If you're interested in criminal law, for example, then we have something called legal aid, which is available only for the poorest people in society. So to make sure that everybody has representation when they go to court. This is quite a low amount of money that's available. So you would have a much lower standard of living, if that was your job, than if you were working as an employed barrister or as a solicitor in a different field. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you a lot.
Can I ask you which area of law you're interested in?
I'm interested in contract law.
In contract law?
Yes.
So in commercial law, there's probably not that much discrepancy in salary. Just remember that a barrister doesn't earn any money unless somebody employs them. So unless a solicitor contracts you as a barrister, unless you're working, you earn nothing. Whereas for most people, they go to work and they get paid a salary whether they work or not. That's the difference.
Thank you for answering my questions.
No problem. Can I ask you one more question, if you don't mind?
Yes, of course.
Sorry. When you asked me the question about security for lawyers, is that because that's a problem here, or is it just something you thought I meant?
I think that luckily I'm not working right now as a professional lawyer because I'm just studying, but having my parents being lawyers, I see some unpleasant situations in their career path, and sometimes they tell me not really. Yes, there is an. It often happens that a client of the other side can threaten you or your family. It's just a question of legal systems and question of the efficiency of institutions, which provides that security for lawyers, because it's a dangerous job actually.
And I'm sorry your family have received those kind of threats. That's a terrible situation, and I think bad people make threat. If you're a criminal barrister, at some point you'll be defending someone who's guilty, and sometimes you won't win. Sometimes they will get convicted. I made a joke earlier about the wigs barristers wear in court. Now, the original philosophy behind this was that everyone was to look the same, so that it's like a democracy of justice. One of the things that's come out of it, though, is that you're fairly anonymous, and it's quite interesting. You will hear speeches given by judges or barristers saying they were in a restaurant and they saw someone who had threatened them in court or whatever, but they didn't recognise them because they didn't have the wig on. And I think that's quite, what seems like quite an odd system sometimes has a little bit of a benefit that way as well. Yeah. But I would say in the UK, the police are, again, touch wood, because things happen, but the police are pretty good at protecting legal professionals, but also other police officers against these kind of threats. So it's something that's taken very seriously. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, I only have 5 minutes, sorry. So I'm going to whiz. Sorry. Okay. One of the things I've talked about is the training route. What I'm also going to talk to you about is some of the things that you should do while training in order to add to your employability when it comes to either a pupillage or a training contract. And the main one of these is pro bono. Does everyone know what pro bono means? Yeah? Okay. So it's voluntary work that lawyers do and also law students can do. At BPP, we have huge numbers of projects, all of them really interesting, where we encourage students to get involved. That gives you a little bit of experience before you qualify. We also have a mooting society, which is legal debating. I can see some nodding, so you all know mooting. Commercial awareness society, which is quite a big thing, because obviously law firms are businesses and they have to be productive and efficient as all others. We also have a negotiation society now. There's a big trend in the UK to move away from cases going to court. I don't know if that's the same here, but there's a big emphasis on alternative dispute resolution. So seeing mediators, all family cases now, you have to see a mediator before you can bring action, except in some rare exceptions, like if domestic violence has been involved. For commercial disputes, you're encouraged to see either a mediator or an arbitrator, and if you don't, if you're obstructive to that, it can have an impact on the costs that you're awarded or not awarded at the end of the case. So again, we really encourage students to think about that and to get involved in these kind of areas as well. We have at BPP, which I think are brilliant, mock courtrooms. So when we teach advocacy, you're in what looks like a courtroom. So the person that, if you're cross-examining, is stood in a witness box. The tutor will play the part of a judge. So it gives you that kind of real-life experience. Whoever you study with, is really worth checking that those kind of facilities are available. Because I know we're kind of up against time, what I think I'll do is I'll stop my part of the talk now, but are there any other general questions? Because I think I'd rather answer those if there are any. Anyone else? No? Okay, in which case I will say thank you very much. What I will do is move to the last slide, which gives my contact details. And you're very welcome to email me if you have any other questions. Whether you want to study with us or not, I can point you to the right websites for more information. Law Cabs is the application gateway, the Law Society, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority in the UK, all of them have a lot of really helpful information. If you Google training contract applications, you'll find lots of information. I mean, if you do come and study with us, we have an awesome careers office, so they would be able to also give you that information. And our partners in Ukraine, Бизнес-Линк, are also very, very up to date on the application process, how to apply, what's helpful in terms of extracurricular, and what isn't necessarily so important. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.